So we're going to talk about the H1B lottery. People have already been putting their names in. The people who are selected to actually apply for the H1B, that's going to be announced on March 31st, so in a couple of days here. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about strategies because this is one of the things, unfortunately, that happens to international students a lot is we make all these plans and we do everything we can, but there's still a certain level of uncertainty, and that's okay. That's normal. And one of the goals of this meeting is to show that there are different options, regardless of what happens, whether you get selected or not. And so today I'll kind of lay out like a little roadmap depending on whether you do get ultimately selected for the lottery or not. So, first things first, if you're not as familiar with the H1B lottery process, um, it's changed in recent years. Previously, people had to apply in April a full application, and then USCIS determined usually so there's 65,000 slots. Last year, 700,000 people applied. Um, so there's a lottery to see which one of these applicants will the USCIS actually look at. Well, they've actually simplified the process a little bit in recent years, where now in March, all a company has to do is put in a name and say, "Oh, we want to apply for this individual," and then at the end of March, the USCIS has a random selection, and those people that are selected are notified, and then they fill out the full application. So it's kind of nice in the sense of students and companies aren't going through the process of putting together an entire application packet only to find out that they haven't been selected. Then the applications themselves are reviewed over the summer. If USCIS has more questions, that's when they send a request for evidence. And approval notices start going out as early as June, but most of them take into July, August, September. Um, that's kind of a real quick overview of the process. So in these coming days, as we think about whether we get selected or not, obviously if your application is selected, make sure to file that complete application before the deadline. Last thing you want to do is go through all of this, get selected, and then lose your spot because you didn't actually submit a full application. You also want to start preparing for potential requests for evidence or RFEs, and that just looks like getting all your documentation together, trying to anticipate anything that might come up, if there's any questions about your record, if maybe you made any changes along the way, like you changed addresses, make sure that got reported to your DSO, that your CVIS record is now accurate. You want to make sure that your record is as clean as possible. You also want to be aware of whether you applied for H1B with change of status or with consular processing. If your company applied, I should say, because the company has to do it. But if they applied with change of status and you get approved, then the new status automatically goes into effect on October 1st. Whereas if they applied for consular processing, that means that you actually have to depart the U.S., go to an embassy, meet with an official, and get that H-1B visa stamp, and then re-enter the U.S. before your change of status is actually considered active. And then obviously, not everybody's selected, unfortunately. So we can still look to see if there's additional lottery rounds. Sometimes not all 65,000 slots get filled. Some people don't apply on time. Some people are deemed to be ineligible. If that happens enough, USCIS will actually do a second lottery and announce a whole new set of people that are able to apply. So it's definitely a, a really nice backup, but it's certainly not like the ideal situation. So in the meantime, obviously maintain work authorization. If you had CPT or OPT, continue to do that. If you had it with your school and it's running out, you can apply to a different program to extend your F1 status. And the other option, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on here, is exploring alternative visa pathways. The H1B is probably one of the most commonly sought after, but there are other options too. Here's some of the ways that students will generally continue to keep their work authorization up. There's the OPT, obviously, the STEM OPT extension if your program's eligible for that. There's also something called the Cap Gap extension, which it means that if your OPT, whether it's a regular OPT or a STEM OPT, is expiring, or like the end date's coming up, but you applied for H1B, you automatically get a extension. So you hit the cap of your OPT, and there's a gap before the H1B goes into effect. But so there's an automatic extension there. So basically, to give dates to it, say I apply for H1B, I get selected in the lottery on the 31st. I submit my application in April, but then my OPT ends in June. Well, from June to September 30th, before it goes into effect on October 1st, whereas otherwise I wouldn't have work authorization, the cap gap fills that. So that's something that it automatically applies if if that is your situation. But, one thing to be mindful of is what happens if, and this is unfortunate, that does happen sometimes. For whatever reason, USCIS has taken a long time to process your application. And now we're getting to the point where it's getting into September, mid-September, October is coming up. You have that application, maybe you had an RFE, you applied to it, but you still don't have your approval. You need to work with your employer, unfortunately, to take an unpaid leave until you get that announced, or that approval notice, basically, because the cap gap extension expires on September 30th. So that doesn't happen all the time, but it's just something to be aware of in case you do find yourself in that situation. All right. So to this point, I've talked about the quote unquote regular H1B, and that's the 65,000 applicants. There are also cap exempt H1B fields. So basically, companies in this area are able to apply for H1B. They can do it year round, and they don't have to adhere to the 65,000 cap. And so the industries where that's a possibility are universities, nonprofit research organizations, government research, and then related institutions that have to do with matters related to the government, nonprofits, things like that. So if you're able to qualify for a position in that field, then you're really leveling up in the game, because now you don't have to adhere to 65,000. Excuse me, the 65,000 cap, and you can get your H1B in a different way. The alternative visa options, we'll start getting into those. One of them is something called the O1. This is for individuals with extraordinary ability. So, in order to qualify for this, there has to be some form of extraordinary achievement. So, one student that I work with who recently got approved for this, he got approved because he had several publications in his field in peer-reviewed journals. And he also had spoken at conferences. So he was able to kind of like list these things out as evidence that he's an extraordinary individual in his field. Any media recognition, articles that are written about him online in newspapers, he saved copies of those and submitted those. And then he also got expert endorsement. So other faculty researchers that he had been working with, people like that, had written letters of recommendation for him. So that's a way that you could get something called the O1. there's certain students that I've worked with that have been interested in this visa. Unfortunately, they waited too long, right? So they waited until the lottery, as their program is ending, their last lottery, they didn't get selected. And now all of a sudden they're thinking about, oh, how can I qualify for O1? Let me get some things published in peer reviewed journals. Let me reach out for some expert endorsements. And all these things take time, especially getting published. So they ran out of time. Whereas I've worked with other students who have planned ahead and started even while they're still in their program of study, submitting articles to research journals. And so then by the time they were on OPT, they had the confidence of, well, I'm hoping to get selected in the lottery this year, but if not, I've been published 4 times and I've been featured in a couple of journals, newspaper articles. So I'll submit myself for an O1 afterwards, if it doesn't work out. Another option is something called the L1. So this is a multinational transfer, and it allows foreign nationals to work abroad 1 year with a multinational company. And I mean, it's the U.S. We have lots of multinational companies here. So just like the H1, for this one, the company initiates the L1 process. With the O1, the individual does. Like I'm submitting that I'm an extraordinary individual. The L1 is an employer request. So obviously, I said it was some international transfer, an international transfer in a multinational company. But for this sense, you'd be working at the U.S. branch, right? That's where you get the L1 to work here in the U.S. And it's initially a year, but it is renewable, like a lot of these ones are. Next, there's the E2 visa. Here's the requirements for that: substantially invest in a U.S. company and in an active business, or promote business development for that company. This may be changing. Donald Trump has suggested, whatever word you want to use. He's put it out there that we might start pulling back on the E2 visas and do something called a gold card instead, which is basically the same thing. With the E2, you need to significantly invest in U.S. enterprise. With the gold card, you would do something similar, but it'd almost be more of a direct payment to the U.S. government for it. And I think the price tag that's been floated for that is $5 million. So if you have $5 million burning a hole in your pocket, maybe you'll be rooting for that. But for now, the E2 is still a viable option for international students here looking for a different visa. For Canadians and Mexicans specifically, there's something called a TN visa, which basically allows for individuals from Canada or Mexico with specific degree and experience, and or who are working in eligible professions to apply for a visa to stay here. So that's something to look into also. And then a couple of lesser known ones and ones that not as many people apply for. There's an H3 trainee visa, which is a short-term visa for different training programs. There's a J1 exchange visitor. This could be like a research scholar, professor, an intern. It doesn't offer a direct pathway to citizenship, but it is an option for maintaining your status while you're here. And then there's the EB2 national interest waiver, which is, again, this one's self-sponsored, and it's a green card for, also individuals with, extraordinary individuals in their field. But this one specifically is trying to leverage that into green card here in the U.S., whereas the EB2 on its own is just that temporary visa. But you can add the national interest waiver addition onto it to try to get yourself on the green card pathway. So there's a couple of databases that students can use to search for companies that have been known to sponsor students. That's one of the issues that comes up with international students is I'm doing all these things. I'm working for a company, but I need to convince them in order to to apply for the H1B for me. But obviously, if you know the company has already done that in the past, then you're giving yourself a leg up. So USCIS does issue H1B reports where they show like which how many H1Bs have been approved to different companies. There's also My Visa Jobs, which is a place that you can look up. And there's also a company called Northbridge. They haven't gone live yet, but they're scheduled to next month. And that's one of the things that they'll be doing is leveraging this list and making that information widely or easily accessible for people. You can also target those cap exempt employers, look at specialized job boards, and just do your own individual research on individual companies, especially if you're interested in working with them. Hi. Okay. Sorry, my son just woke up. Thank you. Yeah, can you grab one for him? Thanks. So another option is negotiate visa sponsorship with your employer. Obviously, if you're working with them already, starting to put that idea out there that hey, I've been with the company for this amount of time. I've done X, Y, and Z. I've done these projects. I'd really like to stay with the company. So, is visa sponsorship something that you'd be interested in? If you're a highly valuable employee, you can highlight your unique skills and contributions. Do a cost benefit analysis for the employer about this is how much it costs, but then this is how much it costs to apply for the H1B. But then if you don't do it, and then I'm not allowed to stay with the company, this is how much it would cost to be without the position. You'd lose as much business if I wasn't there. What was the other thing I was going to say about that? Oh, like the job search, how much it would cost to find somebody new. Obviously, what if they don't work out? Then there's lost costs there. So there's different ways that you can kind of frame this with your employer in order to show how beneficial it is to them and a good investment for them to fulfill or to be willing to sponsor you for that. And here we see different industry trends. The primary sectors that offer the majority of H1B visas. So I don't think it surprises anybody that technology and STEM is by far and away the leading industry for H1B visas. But there's also a good amount in healthcare and research, finance companies or business consulting, and startups too. Especially startups, that have a multinational focus or end goal. They love to leverage international students with your unique experience and your ties to different home countries. So they're often willing to sponsor, as long as they can financially afford it, because it is a bit of an investment. It's not the end of the world. It's a few $1,000s, but it is something that obviously comes into play. So here's where the power of networking comes into play, and working those connections, whether it be through LinkedIn, where many of you found this presentation, through professional associations, often associated with your line of work, building relationships with people, within your company, within your industry, other international students who've successfully navigated the H1B process, and excuse me, and just kind of becoming more ingrained in that particular industry, so that maybe it doesn't work out with your other company or with your current company, but people in other companies that have gotten to know you through these different networking things that you've done, they can reach out. Hey, we think you'd be a great fit for this position over here. You should apply for it. The company's, sponsored 3 students last year, so maybe they'll sponsor you. There's really lots of power and community here. So here's kind of like a recap of everything we've gone over so far. Um, you know, the different ways to do this, and also position yourself for the green card, which is, I know, for lots of students, the end goal. So the different ways that you can, the different green card pathways, I should say, uh, employment based is one of the big ones through that EB2 company being willing to sponsor you for the green card. There's also self sponsorship through the national interest waiver I talked about previously. There's also something called the EB1A for extraordinary ability. Obviously, there's the family based green card. A lot of people are familiar with this one. You marry a U.S. citizen, you can file for a green card. And then there's other pathways also through things such as the diversity visa, asylum, or other special programs. Super important, though, while we go through here, to remember to maintain legal status while exploring options. Um, be aware of your current visa. Is it still active? Are you allowed to leave the U.S. and re-enter? Even if your visa is expired, you're allowed to stay in the U.S. You just like the visa is used to re-enter the U.S. So even if your visa is expired, but maybe you still have an active I-20, if you're an international student, you can still stay in the U.S. While you just can't leave and re-enter. And if you were to leave, you need to go to the embassy and reapply for a visa extension before you're able to re-enter the U.S. again. Obviously, unlawful presence is something to avoid at all costs, at all possible. So the two most common ways that unlawful status or unlawful presence gets accrued by international students is working without authorization. So if you're going to apply for CPT, OPT, something like that, make sure that you get that approval before you start working. Some students make the mistake of applying and then starting to work and thinking that it's okay because they applied. But for CPT, for example, if I get an application on Monday, I don't process it till Friday. As a DSO, I cannot backdate the start date until Monday. Uh, the system is set up so that it only allows a start date as early as that given day. If I try to enter anything earlier than that day, I get an error message. So make sure that you're getting that I-20 with that work authorization before you start working. And then the other way, obviously, is if you fail to maintain status in some way, maybe you drop a little full course load, or you get withdrawn from your classes for whatever reason, then you fall out of status because you didn't maintain the full course load as an international student. So really important to continue to plan ahead. Oftentimes, months ahead if possible, in order to make sure that whatever happens with the H1B application, that you're still able to have some form of legal presence. So here's the key takeaways here. If you are selected, remember to file for that petition, prepare for the RFEs. If there's anything in your past that you think might come up. If you're not selected, you have different options available to you, whether it be OPT, STEM OPT, CAP exemption, H1Bs, the different visas we've discussed so far. Keep in mind different strategies with your employer. Maybe they did sponsor you for this year, but you can start, having those discussions about how we apply for it next year and why it's a good investment for the company. And also obviously just from your own sake, just do long-term planning about whatever options might be available to you. And if the H1B doesn't work out, what are going to be the next steps? Are you going to continue to stay in the U.S. and file different and complete different programs of study, or are you ultimately going to go home? Are you going to try to marry an American? Just visit all these different options because they are all out there. So it's important to give them time and consideration in advance, so you don't find yourself scrambling at the end trying to educate yourself about everything. Um, while the clock's running out. So that's where, if you're not already in my community, I strongly recommend joining it because Ragul's in there. Ragul can vouch for this. I have weekly calls. I answer the questions, and we can kind of go through. Like we have weekly calls in there where I can break down your situation, give you the different options that are available to you. This has kind of been like a high level overview, but during those weekly calls, we can really get into your own specific situation and lay out like what's the most important values to you, what it is you're trying to do, what things are important for Ragul. Ragul, I'm not gonna. I hope I'm not violating your privacy here by saying Ragul wants to come somewhere warm. So most of our focus with his search has been staying in warm locations, and there's obviously like some other ones there about, like, oh, how do I get my family over here? How do I, make sure that how do I decide whether to do CPT or maintain my OPT eligibility? All these different things, like we can break that down. I also have, different message boards and everything where, I provide updates on things as they come along. Uh, there's different CVIS broadcast updates. Obviously, the current administration is changing things, so I post updates about there. And then I also have some training modules about some topics that we've gone over here in more detail, and also other things like getting work authorization in the U.S., applying for a visa interview, things of that nature. So if you're interested, let me know. I'd be more than happy to send you more information. That concludes the presentation that I have. But I'm sure you have some questions, so we can go ahead and take those now. Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's easy. All I have to do is get someone to fall in love with me and agree to marry me. Easy. A lot of people take that route. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you'd be a good candidate for this one, the L1 with the multinational company. Get involved with some different human rights organization, but also the O1. If you're already getting publications and you're already doing different things with that, um, and that's where I'm not an immigration attorney, so they might be able to kind of give you better insight into which one would be the best route for you. But even just based on my knowledge of it, I mean, I think you would qualify for either one of those. No, no, there's no age bar. This is America, dude. Like Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook when he was what, 19? Like no, there's no age requirement on this. Thanks for that, Riggle. Yeah, it's gonna be March 31st. Yeah. We don't know that yet. So basically, what will happen is they're going to do that first application, the first lottery selection, and there'll be 65,000 slots, and then after that, they'll see how many people didn't get their application in on time, how many people they denied, and if it's maybe they'll have 8,000 slots, and then in June or July they'll announce a second lottery wave. But they obviously need to do the first one yet. And don't worry that you haven't gotten notified yet. Um, the announcement hasn't come out yet, so that's perfectly normal. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And good luck. I think it's Monday. Yeah, Monday's gonna be a big day for you. Okay. Yes. Yes. And everybody else is. I know this is one of the terrible things. I shouldn't use the word terrible. It's one of the things that is very difficult though for international students is all the waiting and the uncertainty, and so that's part of what I try to do is provide a little clarity, and just kind of set expectations about either way you're going to have options after this. So but obviously we hope that the path that you're taking is the one for the selection. So best of luck to you there. But again, even if it doesn't happen, there's some other things you can do. Okay.